unfortunately, I think we have to do it this way, and it's, I don't like it either, but so I go back to where we talked about all these years that taxes were kept down. And then whimsically, after fourth year, they jumped, and then they went like this again. And they did this. And then they stole, the money was taken from the street maintenance program. If that was never done, we wouldn't be in the position we are in some of that. But it was taken out of that to keep taxes lowered. Good thing, bad
And
thing.
that was
Good thing,
done at a
bad thing.
time where,
Good thing, bad
Yeah.
thing. It was a good thing at the point, but again, somebody sees a 1% increase, they don't see that. You see that 6, 7, 8%. 1% you don't really see. It's that 6, 8% that kicks you. You know,
that was like 2010 sort of timeframe, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yes, I mean,
Yeah,
hard
we are
to
still
go back
working.
and criticize them when they were in the middle of that
Well,
nightmare.
we are now almost to the end of, like, those projects that were identified in 2010, 2012. We're almost through those now, finally.
but I mean, it's just gotta keep that in mind. You don't, all we did was kick the can down the street. And now we finally caught up to the can again. Do we wanna kick it, or we wanna pick it up and throw it in the garbage? I think we should pick it up and throw it in the garbage. And that's, unfortunately, that's, unrealistic is not to do something
Yep.
now.
Well, you just look at the usage per person. I mean, I don't think I have it on this sheet here, but what was it? Like
95 per capita.
And it used to be like 70?
Yeah, it used to be
That was like
70
5 years
between
ago?
70
The
and
state-
75. and
The state
we
average is
shot-
75.
Yeah, and we
Yeah.
shot straight through
Yeah,
up to
'cause it's just
95,
all these new
96.
houses with irrigation systems and you just. people
And
are just
corporate
using it.
business.
Yeah, you're growing and, your infrastructure's gotta keep up somehow, so.
More people at home during the day,
Yeah,
all
that's
of
probably-
it.
Yeah, that's a
all
good
of
point
it.
too, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, that has.
2020, there was a lot of that, where people, I don't blame anybody for that, but it can't be the long-term trend. But there were a lot of people that suddenly were looking at their lawns that hadn't been, right? Oh, I want to water them, and there was a lot of people with kids at home, and suddenly it's like, well, pool sounds like a great idea.
Yeah.
Totally get it.
Yep.
But if that behavior then becomes forever, well, it's expensive for infrastructure. I mean, just is, so.
Homeschooling's up 14% too, so there's more water there.
I'm one of them.
Yep. See?
So do we pick an alternative tonight?
Well, I just need to know what to present, because this is change to the fee scale, or a change to code, so we need to post it ahead of time. We gotta get 10 days in and all that stuff, so.
Okay.
I'd like to see 5% on the lowest tier and 7% increase on the rest.
I could entertain that. How many's on the lowest tier? That was kind of my question.
Well, I looked at my water bill after all these discussions, and we average about 6,500 a month.
Yeah, and we're
And I have
less
three
than that
girls
too.
that are constantly putting their hair down the drain, so.
For most people, they're not gonna be out of that first tier. So I think,
Yeah, most people will be in the bottom tier.
And what did you say, Luke? You wanna go 7 on the low tier?
no,
low tier?
5% increase on the low consumption, 0 to 10,000. Then I'd rather see like 7,000 on the other three, or 7%, sorry, on the other three, because then it's an incentive for people to use under 10,000, but it's not ridiculous at the same time. The average household's not gonna notice it, is where I'm at with it.
Just on the first year you're talking?
Yes,
Then
just on the first year,
Stick with your 3 for the next 3 years.
Yep. And see where it plays out. I don't wanna have to bond, that's,
Yeah, me neither.
that,
Me
This-
either,
this
that's why
is-
I'd just soon leave
I think
it,
if-
that's what he's got alternative to, and leave it at that.
Yeah, I think
Two.
if the intent is to not bond, then we should be doing the 7 across the board.
Okay,
And the reason being is that the only way that the bottom tier is really contributing is in aggregate, not individually. Right? I mean, if your bill is, say, $60 a month, and only a portion of that is water, and only a portion of that water portion is going up 7%, that ends up being a small amount to any one individual, and we don't really get anywhere unless it's an aggregate, because we're talking about the bottom of the pyramid. And, you know, it's, the difference between 5 and 7 isn't huge in any one instance, but it does help when it's the base of the pyramid. And if we, yeah, I mean, I really don't want to bond, but right now, the path we're on, we're gonna bond twice, each time for about 5.5 million, and that is, I mean, on 5.5 million, there's not any way we're paying, we're gonna pay a whole lot more in interest than anybody on this council wants to see.
Well, these rate hikes won't even get us to that amount over time.
This is why I came up with alternative 2, because what I presented originally did not, I couldn't get through a week without thinking about that. I think that alternative 2, and why I'm recommending that, is I think that's kind of that minimum where I can at least still imagine a path that if we get reduced use and we get to that 75 gallons per capita, and we're gonna collect some additional revenue, we have a chance. But I think that if we're not doing both, or we go to that original where it was just 3%, I don't like my odds. I mean, I'm trying to strike a balance. I mean, because I mean, if I came in here and said, all right, 15% on everything all across the board, I don't think that was gonna fly. And I think there's good reasons for that. But at the same time, then you know, it is functionally my job to find that margin, that marginal path to success, right? What is the lowest rate we can have and still have an opportunity to succeed?
I could go for
That's
alternative
genuinely
2.
where I think we're at. I can't promise success, but I think I'm at the margin, and I think there is a possibility that we can get there, and we're gonna have to do 2 things. We're gonna have to have rates go up, and we're gonna have to continue to push to get less usage.
I could go for alternative 2. And if we overcorrect, we can always stop the increases for a year, yeah.
Absolutely. If we get through year 2027 or 2028, let's say we get to 2028, and I come back and I say, well, guess what? We thought we were gonna have 175,000 available for capital, and we have 1.175 for capital. 1.7, you know, over $1 million. I mean, we've lowered rates in the past. It can be done again. There's nothing that prevents that. If we genuinely collect too much money in the water fund, we can genuinely give it back.
Yeah, I think.
Alternative 2.
Alternative 2?
Yep.
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 Jeff?
I'm just gonna say no, just to say no.
What? All
I'm
right.
just kidding.
All right. Thank you, Mike.
Can I be the
Appreciate
first
you.
one to come in and complain about the proposed water rates? See you tomorrow morning.
Use less water.
All right, let's move on to old business here, F1. We've got the draft solar ordinance.
Good evening again. At the June COW meeting, so way back, it was discussed if the city would be able to take any action in regards to bonding or bonding requirements for any large solar projects that came into the city, and whether or not it'd be important for us to do that. And looking further into the issue, and doing a lot of research at what other cities are doing around the state, we recommend adopting a solar ordinance for solar farms and all solar devices within the city. We don't have anything in our zoning ordinance that allows solar on roofs right now. We allow it in our building permits, but we don't actually allow it anywhere. So created an ordinance that actually allows residential solar within our city, which is already happening, so.
Yes, it is. And, yeah, I asked Rum River about specifics on this and about installing an Isani, and they sent me just the basic guidelines. So people seem to think it's just state guideline at that point instead of city, so that's how it's been done. Where did you get all this information? There's quite a bit in there. I think most of it's pretty good, but I'm just curious, did you pull it from other?
I pulled it from other cities. I did attend a solar workshop, actually, for a solar garden done in Big Lake, and talked to people there to see what they recommended on doing, for the agrivoltaics and all of that information as well. So, I actually feel like I spent a lot of time on this one, which is why it took more time too, because that wasn't until August that I attended that event.
there's a ton of different ways to do solar too, so I was impressed to see all the different things laid out, so.
And so we used one that was recommended by the people who were at that event and who held it, and then I made my own tweaks according to what our discussions held previously, and so that's how we got to here.
So with the bonding requirements, can you just give us an overview on that?
Yeah, actually, can I just start from the beginning and
Yes,
we can go
yes,
through
sorry,
it? So section 2 changes are just adding all of the language that's, well, we'll start from the very beginning. So we also have wind energy conversion systems in our ordinance, and it was under non-residential use regulations, and that didn't make any sense because we did find out through our searching, because we both knew that we allowed wind energy systems on conversion systems on roofs in residential places. And so it took a long time, but Josie eventually found it. She's like, here it is, use regulations, and on non-residential use regulations. And so made the decision to put it into a new category for alternative energy sources. And so that's why you're seeing wind energy conversion systems completely Xed out, because we're moving it to a different section that actually makes sense for that. And so solar and wind will be in a place that we can actually find it. And so then we go to section 2, which does allow, it just shows all of the vocabulary. So that's where we keep all of our definitions within the zoning ordinance, and so that makes sure that we aren't missing anything that we'll need to reference back to, which we've done quite a few times, relying on those definitions to make sure that we're regulating the correct thing. So, sorry, I'm scrolling. So then, starting with solar. So permitted accessory use, solar energy systems will be a permitted accessory use in all zoning districts where structures are currently allowed, subject to certain requirements as set forth below. And so that includes solar carports and associated electric vehicle charging equipment are permitted accessory use on surface parking lots in the R4, B2, B3, BIT, and I1 zoning districts. And so those are our commercial districts, plus I also added residential for apartment buildings. And then we have height requirements. Building or roof-mounted solar energy systems shall not exceed the maximum allowed height in any zoning district. For purposes of height measurement, solar energy systems other than building and integrated systems shall be given an equivalent exception to height standards as building-mounted mechanical systems. Ground or pole-mounted solar energy systems shall not exceed 15 feet when oriented at a maximum tilt. And solar carports in non-residential districts shall not exceed 20 feet in height.
Where did you get the 15-foot ground mount maximum?
That's pretty standard throughout the state of Minnesota, so that's a very, it's
Okay.
whatever, it's what was recommended by everyone. So that is where it came from. I also know that our other structures are higher, but plus looking at fencing and screening options for that seemed like a decent height, as also is what's recommended for allowing agrivoltaics to grow underneath it. So that's where it came from. You want it to be high enough so you could potentially grow something underneath it or maintain vegetation, but not too high that it becomes an obstruction to your views or for your neighbors, or shade for a neighboring parcel.
Okay, and I know that the solar panel disposal has been a big thing, and I know a lot of people actually use old solar panels for fencing. Is that something that we could incorporate into this, or would that be a separate ordinance change?
That would be in our fencing ordinance.
Okay, and that's, I assume that's not currently allowed to use a solar
No.
panel as a, okay.
Nope, we only allow chain link, wood, or vinyl fencing at this time.
Okay, have you ever heard that request for a, probably not, okay. I just think in the future, as these systems that are being installed in the next 10, 15 years, when the life cycle of the panels are up, you're gonna have people that might think, hey, instead of paying to get rid of these, maybe I could make a fence out of them. So
Then
I've,
you got that same problem, it's reflecting back on the people. I wouldn't recommend that.
okay,
I would not recommend that panel be used for a fence. Can you imagine if your neighbor put that up for his fence and the sun hit it and it shines in your room?
well, they don't
They'll still
reflect back.
reflect, they'll still reflect it.
Okay,
They still will reflect it. dirty mirror reflex.
So setbacks, solar energy systems must meet the accessory structure setback for whatever zoning districts it is in. And the primary land use associated with the lot on which the system is located, except as allowed below. So roof or building mounted solar energy systems, the collector surface and mounted devices for roof mounted systems shall not extend beyond the exterior perimeter of the building on which the system is mounted or built, unless the collector and mounting system has been explicitly engineered to safely extend. So that means the panels can't overhang over a roof.
So there's actually state code on that requires 3 feet from the peak, 3 feet from one side of the structure, and I believe it's 16 or 18 inches from the bottom of the roof. So would our ordinance allow people to not follow that state code? Or is that something, because ours is less restrictive than what the state requires
Right,
in
it
this?
would not allow that. It
So
just-
should we-
It just prevents, from updated codes. Zoning is more for regulations to prevent blight in a community too. So like if they all of a sudden start allowing, these giant panels that are overhanging or extensions off
Okay,
the roof,
so it's to keep it from the worst case scenario.
Yes.
Got it, okay.
it gives us one extra way to attack it from a code enforcement standpoint.
Okay.
Solar collectors mounted on the sides of buildings and serving as awnings are considered to be building integrated systems and are regulated as awnings. Ground-mounted solar systems. Ground-mounted solar energy systems may not extend into the side yard or rear setback, so it still has to follow all of our setback guidelines when oriented at a minimum design tilt. So when they're flat, they can't be extending into that setback. Except as otherwise allowed for building mechanical systems. Visibility, solar energy systems in residential districts shall be designed to minimize visual impacts from the public right-of-way as described in 3.A through C. Visibility standards do not apply to systems in non-residential districts except for historic buildings or district review as described in 5.
Does that seem a little vague at all?
Well,
to
it
you?
does go into it more, so then it says, building integrated photovoltaic systems, building integrated systems shall be allowed regardless of whether the system is visible from the public right-of-way, provided the building component in which a system is integrated meets all required setbacks, land use or performance standards for the district in which the building is located, and roof-mounted or ground-mounted solar energy systems shall not be restricted for aesthetic reasons if the system is not visible from the closest edge of any public right-of-way other than an alley, or if the system meets the following standards.
So if you can see someone's solar system from the street that they live on, it's not allowed?
It is allowed,
It just seems kind of gray.
it is, so closest edge of any, sorry. The system is sorry, it's getting late. Yes, so if you can visibly see it, then it could be restricted from any right-of-way, so they'll need to have some sort of screening or fence, which is often required for that, and it includes trees, so they could have trees planted that screen it from the right-of-way as well.
I don't know. I don't know that I agree with that. I mean, by the time you have a solar system on a roof, it's the same obtrusion of vision as a regular roof. So I mean, we don't have people having to put up fences to cover their roof.
No, she's referring to a ground roof.
That's a ground-mounted.
That's ground mounted.
Oh, okay, I was asking about roof mounted. It says the same thing. Other than no more than 10 inches above the roof. But it's the same thing.
So we could be more specific in that if you wanted it to be. For roof-mounted, we could just say that's for ground-mounted systems.
I think so, because I don't think roof mounted, you'd have a really hard time telling someone they can't put up solar unless they put up a fence in their front yard that's 12 feet tall to,
Well, we don't allow that anyway.
oh, right,
so-
it wouldn't work.
Yeah.
Had to put a big berm.
Huh?
You'd have to build a big
Yeah.
berm with a fence on top.
Yeah, ground mounted, I understand it's a little easier to conceal that. Roof mounted, it's very, very hard to,
So it does talk further about the visibility standards for roof mounted, and on pitched roofs that are visible from the nearest edge of the right-of-way shall have the same finished pitch as a roof and be no more than 10 inches above the roof. So it just has to follow the lines of the roof.
And
So they can still see it, you don't have to screen it for roof.
why,
It's just
why
a
is
ground.
that it has to be the same pitch?
I think that's for just aesthetic standards.
Okay, a lot of people actually mount them at so you have a specific angle that you need, so it's most common to have them the same pitch as the roof, but there are some people that'll pitch it up higher, so you get a better angle in the winter. So I don't know that I necessarily agree with that part of that. I don't know if there was some logic behind that, but I think if someone wants to pitch it a little bit, I don't think that's out of line. But I don't know I think we should just stay out of that.
I don't think you wanna pitch it any higher. You get snow load underneath it, it's gonna push it up. You'd be better off to keep it following the roof line. If you have something sitting up like this on a roof, more snow's gonna pack in behind it.
Could be.
That'd be a stupid thing to do, cause then you're gonna just wreck your panel. Cause it's gonna heave and pop up.
It could be, but some people do it.
Well, that doesn't mean everybody's smart in the world either.
All right.
I
But I don't think we should be limiting, if someone wants to, pitch their panels a certain way, I don't think that's any of our business. For productivity's sake, especially in Minnesota, because if you have say if you only have a 312 pitch, in the winter, your production goes down like 80%. So some people if you can pitch it to a 412, you're gonna only lose 50% or whatever the ratio is, and I don't think that's any of our business to say that.
Minimum roof pitch is 412 now.
Oh, right, but there's a lot of places here that are 312 already existing. So that was just an
I haven't seen
example.
one in 40 years.
I have two.
I think you would have to use a degree amount from
Yeah.
the slope of the roof, otherwise you could get somebody skirting a ordinance and put it straight across their roof, just, yeah, you can't.
We always
Gotta
allow for
have something
variances.
involved.
Oh, yeah, okay.
On unique situations too.
Okay.
So keep that in mind.
I just think it's weird that we're telling them what pitch it has to have. But-
Roof-mounted systems on flat roofs that are visible from the nearest edge of the front right-of-way shall not be more than 5 feet above the finished roof and are exempt from any rooftop equipment or mechanical system screening, which we do require for commercial buildings.
So what if, for example, my neighbors, they have a flat roof garage, they've been talking about pitching that for quite a while. What if they were to want to make a pitched roof section out of solar panels? That would not be allowed with that number 2 section. But I think it should be,
Yeah, it would,
because it'd be more than
Would be
5
a-
foot of pitch.
more than 5 feet above the finished roof.
Yeah, but they also wouldn't wanna have a flat roof and then make it pitched with the solar panels, because that defeats the purpose of getting rid of the flat roof. Minnesota is not a flat roof state.
No, I know, but they have a
And
flat
they-
roof.
I know,
Yeah.
it's not.
I know.
So the reason they wanna put a pitched roof on it, so they don't have the snow load sitting on a flat roof.
But if you have a
That's
pitch,
the only reason.
if
You'll
you-
still
if you
get
build
snow,
a
you'll
pitch-
still get the snow load underneath it, and you'll still get the load on the roof.
no, most of it's gonna slide off. Solar panels act almost like a metal roof, and they're
You're
even
gonna have
better
solar
because they get
panel wrapping
warm.
on all 4 sides?
I just
You're still
don't,
gonna get snow blowing in there. I mean, that would defeat the whole purpose of why they wanna get rid of the flat roof, to put a
well, it's just, I disagree. It's just an example. I don't think we should be telling people on if they have a flat roof, they can only go 5 feet above.
A lot of these standards do come, because they did integrate the original writers of this. They're actually really pro-solar, so I think they're allowing as much as they can within the standards that are set by state statute and building code. So I do know that. But just,
I just hate to tell people how they can and can't do their own stuff, so I don't know.
They can still walk in on
Yeah, they
individual
could.
basis, like somebody with a flat roof that we didn't, that it just wouldn't make sense not to pitch it. Okay,
I don't know. Yeah, I mean, I don't know anything about solar really too much, so I mean, this is all kind of,
I know
I mean, I
that,
think you're right, that probably the people that put this together and, I mean, they're putting it together to allow for solar, right? So I mean, they've done you know, some research, I'm sure, on these things, and maybe there's a reason for what's here, but I mean, I understand what you're saying, Luke, that you don't wanna tell people what they can or can't do, but I mean, we do that all the time in zoning,
Right.
you know. Not to say that it can't be changed, but you gotta start somewhere, you know.
Reflectors, all solar energy systems using a reflector to enhance solar production shall minimize glare from the reflector affecting adjacent or nearby properties. Lot coverage, ground mount systems, total collector area shall not exceed half the building footprint of the principal structure. So ground mount systems shall be exempt from lot coverage or impervious surface standards if they have, the soil under the collector maintained with vegetation and not compacted. So it can't just be dirt or gravel underneath, it has to be some sort of vegetation. Ground-mounted system shall not count towards accessory structure limitations, and solar carports in non-residential districts are exempt from lot coverage limitations, specifically because they're usually already over a parking area. Historic buildings, solar energy systems on buildings within designated historic districts or on locally designated historic districts exclusive of state or federal historic designation must be consistent with the standards for solar energy systems on historically designated buildings published by the U.S. Department of Interior. And plan approval is required for all ground-mounted solar energy systems requiring a building permit or other permit from the city of Isanti shall provide a site plan for review. Plan applications for solar energy systems shall be accompanied by 2-scale horizontal and vertical elevation drawings, plan approvals. So that just follows our regular site plan review requirements. And it obviously doesn't indicate compliance with the building code or electric code. Approved solar components, electric solar energy system components must have a UL or equivalent listing, and solar hot water systems must have an SRCC rating. And they must meet building code compliance, electric code compliance, and plumbing code. And all grid inertia solar energy systems shall comply with interconnection requirements of the electric utility that they're utilizing. Off-grid systems are exempt from this requirement, so if somebody puts their own off-grid system, they don't have to show us that they've connected to or contacted their utility, because there isn't one. Principal uses, so the city of Isanti encourages the development of commercial utility scale. Sorry. Energy systems where such systems present few land use conflicts with current and future development patterns. Any ground-mounted solar energy systems, whether it is considered to be a community scale or solar energy system, community solar garden, grid inertia solar energy system, or large-scale solar energy system like what we've been presented with. But they call them all sorts of things for different reasons. That is the principal use on the development lot or lots allowed through a conditional use permit in the R1A Rural Residential Zoning District. So this is obviously your guys' decision along with everything else, but to choose what zoning districts you want to allow like a larger solar garden in. And so the reason why I chose R1A was because it's our rural residential. It's on the outskirts of the city, closer to the tier 1 areas or on the outskirts of the edges of the community. I don't recommend, we do allow it in the I1 part as an accessory structure to the half amount, but that's our most valuable infrastructure, so I don't want to see those lots going to a solar garden when we have already put so much infrastructure in the ground there. So that's really why I chose the R1A district for a solar garden or a large solar district.
Now, does it actually matter what we say?
It doesn't for the largest one, but it
Yeah.
does for all the smaller ones.
Right.
So,
But so I mean, even
yes
this,
and no.
when you're saying you, commercial or utility scale solar energy, would that be like a larger one like what we're talking
so
about?
only the large-scale solar energy system is the one that we don't have any say over.
Okay,
All the
so-
rest of the
so-
ones we do.
So even what you're talking about here, we would have, so it has to reach a certain threshold of
Yes.
production, right? That's right, yeah.
Correct,
it
yeah,
was-
So it's
but
by
it depends
wattage.
on the number of
Yeah,
panels, and
that's right.
50 kilowatt, I
That's
believe
right,
is what it
okay.
is, so it has to be over that.
That's right.
So then I created lot and setback requirements, going off of just our previous discussions too, and just kind of figure out what I think you guys, just all assumptions, so change whatever you want. But a minimum lot size of 20 acres, just knowing that we do have a few smaller 5-acre parcels within that district that have houses nearby that are closer to houses. So we have a really limited amount of R1A properties that are 20 acres, I guess. They all are, oh, there's not very many R1A within our city anyway, but I didn't think we'd want them in neighborhoods. So that's,
I have a quick question. So with the commercial size solar installations, is that only by acreage, or is there a maximum number that you can have residential for kilowatts? I know there's some areas that it's broken down in state code. Did we have anything specific like that?
we did not break that down at all. It's only limited by size in this ordinance.
Okay.
So it has to be 50% of the footprint of the primary structure. So if we get an industrial building that's 10,000 square feet, they can put up to 5,000 square feet if there's enough room on their parcel.
Okay, how about a roof mount? Do we have any limit on roof
No.
mount? Okay,
There's no limit on the amount of roof, I think whatever is allowed. We didn't have any on that. It's just the ground mounted ones that are limited by size.
okay.
So height restriction, I kept it at that 15 feet because of all the recommendations that I read seemed to be the right height. And the property line setbacks, I kept for the district, the underlining zoning district. The roadway setback of 150 feet from the right-of-way center line of state highways and CASAs, 100 feet from other roads except as other determined in the section below. And housing unit setback of 150 feet from any existing dwelling unit except as other determined in this section B5 below. And setback distance should be measured from the edge of the solar energy system array, excluding security fencing, screening, or the berm.
I had a question on the height restriction. I don't think 15 feet is enough for a commercial install. 15 feet isn't very tall, especially for if you're gonna do maximum tilt. That's only 2.5 panels height-wise. So I don't think 15 is good for residential, but I think commercial, they actually go quite a bit higher than that. I don't know if that's something that we heard in our last discussion with that other solar project, but I don't know that 15 feet is high enough, so that one might be something to look into.
Double check it, but I think this is what was recommended, so I'll see if they have other ones even for agrivoltaics, but
Okay,
when I looked again, that was what this group that I got the ordinance from, they're the ones who really push agrivoltaics, which is
Okay.
planting, actual egg underneath it,
yep,
and not, so you can farm and potentially get some equipment in between, and so that's where some of that language came, well, why I chose that specific ordinance, because I thought it allowed for more use for solar.
okay. Yeah, if you could just double check that one, just to make sure, I don't wanna handcuff.
Yep.
I would like to see like a minimum, right now, this zoning ordinance would cover just one solar panel. I mean, somebody couldn't even put up one solar panel without this affecting them?
Right.
Oh, that has to, we have to have a minimum, like 3 or 5.
It's usually based down by
I mean, so
wattage.
many
It's usually by wattage, because every solar panel, you can't say 3 solar panels, because there's solar panels that are 1,000 watts and there's solar panels that are 10 watts. So you do it by wattage, so usually it's,
Square feet then, because wattage level changes every year. I mean, I've watched solar panels.
You go-
from the beginning at the same size, went from 50 to now 200.
you go by the rated wattage. So if you go by your insurance or Conexus or any companies, they go by the rated wattage on the panel, and then they limit you. So like Conexus says that you can't have as a residential more than 40,000 watts grid tied to their system. They have limits on it, so it's always by wattage, by the rated wattage.
Well, what I'm saying, somebody who has a utility shed in the backyard puts
Correct.
up one solar panel so they'd have lighting and maybe a little bit of electricity in there, or somebody wants to put it on their shed or their garage or pole barn.
Greenhouses are a big one for
Right.
solar.
We need to at least curve this to have a certain,
Like
Square
3,000
feet.
watts, or
right.
if you could look into
Well,
that.
that's what the smaller ground-mounted ones are for accessory structures in the beginning part of the ordinance. So like if you're gonna put one at your house, it's way different than this section. This section is for like a large-scale solar. So ground mount is allowed in residential as long as it's less than 50% of your square footage in your house. And it follows the setback requirements.
Well, that's what I was, are you saying you just don't want to have any of this apply to a certain, like you want it to, none of this applies unless it's over a certain amount of power or something like that? Is that what you were saying?
Or amount of solar panels, right?
There's a lot of people actually that use, solar panels to vent their roofs too. So if you have one panel up there, does someone have to come pull a permit and go through all this BS just to have a,
What I was
Well, there's
trying
no
to
permit.
There's
avoid.
no
It's just-
permit
yeah.
requirement, it's just zoning regulation, so that if somebody's putting way too many solar panels in their entire backyard is all solar panels, then.
Yeah, it's not like they'd
So
have
this
to,
is zoning,
they wouldn't
not
have, they wouldn't
permitting.
have to like come in and get approval or anything.
Okay.
It's just, it just
Conditional
has to
use
follow.
permit
I
would be
mean,
required for this larger solar array,
Sure.
which is.
But yeah, I mean,
But
if you
that probably
put something at
comes
your
next.
house, yeah, you know, you're
yeah,
not.
right.
Right, okay,
You still have to apply for building permits and electrical permits regardless.
Well, that's true, yeah, but not because of what we're doing
No,
here.
but not because of
yeah.
what we're doing, that was always there. But yeah, there's no permitting required for this unless it's a larger scale site plan review. So setback distance should be measured from the edges, I said that. Setbacks can be reduced by 50% if the array is fully screened from the setback point of measurement. So I can have more space. And then maximum impervious surface coverage. Ground-mounted systems shall be exempt from this as long as they have, like, the smaller gardens in the residential areas are met with habitat standards consistent with Minnesota state statutes. So Minnesota has set statutes for what those habitats must look like underneath them in these larger gardens to make sure they're not just planting or just letting weed growth happen, I guess, and not actually returfing the area. So that is what this states. And plan approval, screening. A screening plan should be submitted that identifies the type and extent of screening. Screening fences shall be a minimum of 6 feet in height and a maximum of 10 feet in height with a minimum opaqueness of 80%.
What does that mean exactly?
So it means you can't see through it more than 20%.
Okay.
Screening height shall be measured from the finished grade level. A combination of coniferous and deciduous trees shall be planted to soften the appearance of the fence or wall from adjacent properties or the public street. And the city of Isani may require screening where it determines there is a clear community interest in maintaining a view shed. Ground cover buffer areas, the following provisions shall be met related to the clearing of existing vegetation. And this follows our tree preservation guidelines. The project site design shall include the installation, establishment of ground cover meeting the beneficial habitat standard, and panels should be at least 36 inches off the ground to allow mowing and other maintenance. Panels should be spaced to allow vegetation to be self-sustaining, and use of pesticides to maintain vegetation on the site is not allowed. The applicant shall submit a planting plan application accompanied by a completed project planning assessment form provided by the Board of Water, Soil, and
Water Conservation District.
yeah. Thank you. Beneficial habitat standards shall be maintained on the site for the duration of the operation until the site is decommissioned, and the owner of the solar array must complete the established project assessment form at year 4 and every 3 years after that, and allow the County Soil and Water Conservation District to conduct a site visit to verify compliance. So we'll make them maintain their site over the years. And the city of Isani may require submittal of inspection fee at the time of the initial permit application to support ongoing inspection. The applicant shall submit a financial guarantee in the form of a letter of credit, cash deposit, or bond in favor of the community equal to 125% of the cost to meet the beneficial habitat standard.
So I have a question on that. So how exactly does that work? In the solar world, there are a lot of companies that come up and go down, and they come across issues, especially after the 20-year lifespan, and their warranties are just about up, and they're having claims, so they just basically dissolve and start a new LLC. How does that bond protect us if, say, the company goes under? How, I mean, I guess I don't know how that works.
Whether it's a letter of credit or cash, so cash deposit, very clear, right? I'm literally holding your money.
Yep.
Letter of credit is just backed up by the bank, right? So I might have a letter of credit with a particular developer that is through Falcon National Bank. Falcon National Bank is the entity that is going to ensure that that is available.
So if there's a letter of credit or a bond, and the state decides to change their requirements for that, would we be liable? Say if the state decides that they want to push this so hard that they say that nobody's required to bond anymore, would we be on the hook then for the lack of bond? Because if so, that's a huge risk for us.
My suspicion is that in contract law, you would not be able to undo that.
Okay. Is that something that we could ask our attorney? Because that's my biggest worry about this whole thing is if we have a big farm come in and, 25 years when the useful life of the panels is
Even if the
gone.
state doesn't require it, or says you don't, I mean,
What if they
can't
change-
they can't just undo your contract that you have.
Yeah, that's what I'm getting at, is that if I have, let's pick BMX, right? We have a contract that both parties agreed to, and there's a benefit to either of us, just differently. And the state were to step in and say, all right, you can no longer have buildings that are 46,000 square feet with exactly 13 exterior doors, right? Whatever we have over there. Like you can't pass a law that undoes the contract that we have already had. You could pass a law that says no future contracts, but you can't pass a law that makes the contract disappear.
Okay. I guess I just want to make sure there's no way that it could be changed based on state statute and it have us on the hook for it. That's my biggest fear with the whole
That's my
commercial.
understanding of how contract law works. I mean, but yeah, I mean, ask Joe would be
Okay.
it would be a good ask.
I guess the question I had is, even though we can't zone for these, large solar outfits or whatever, I mean, would this bond requirement still apply to them? And they can go wherever they want, but do all the other stipulations apply?
It gives us a leg to stand on to uphold these when we do go to the public hearings. So we can say, we have these standards, this is important to our community to abide by these standards. Doesn't mean they have to listen to them, but we can at least try. And it says that we have something set in our code and we have thought about this and how we want it to look in our community, so we can.
But, because
It
I
gives
know,
us
I
a-
know we talked about the
Yeah.
bonding, but we really can't require it, but they did say that they've done that in the past. And,
Right.
I mean, you see horror stories about, I forget what town it was, but somewhere in Minnesota where they had like all these windmill parts and stuff like that were, you guys have heard that or seen that? No? But, I mean, like piles and piles of all the equipment and parts and everything, and they finally got it cleaned up. But, I mean, could be a real disaster if they go under and you don't have some way to clean it up. But-
That's my biggest worry about the whole thing. The solar industry is very, very up and down and very hit or miss on all of that. And the laws, just like a lot of the stuff in the state, are so volatile and just improperly done. So I don't want to set ourselves up for a failure, and we're going to have to, I mean, we're talking about worrying about bonding. What if you're going to have to bond for $10 million of solar cleanup? That's not something that we should ever have to worry about. So I just want to make doubly sure on that. That's
Well, it's outside of our control anyway.
I don't-
So the large ones are not required to do it either way, so I mean, you're kind of, but I mean, the small ones, that we can enforce it on, so.
So the large ones are not required to bond.
They are required to bond at the state level, so the state requires a large bond from them.
Okay, so
We
the,
don't
for
have to
us.
require it,
Yeah.
but the state does,
so the state would be responsible for the cleanup then at that point?
yes,
Okay,
the PUC.
even better.
Not really, that'll take an extra 20 years.
All right, well, we're at 10:08 here.
And this does go back to planning commission.
Yeah.
So
Do you-
we'll review it then too. We talked about the decommissioning would happen after any 12 consecutive months. So that's when we'd be able to move forward with that bond to clean up. And yes, all on-site power and communication lines running between the elements of the project and connection shall be buried underground on premise, which I've seen bad ones where they're above ground, so that's really important. And then again, it just goes through the same compliance requirements as the smaller ones, so building permits, electric code, plumbing code, utility notification, and any MPCA regulations, stormwater, and reflectors. And then solar access was something we actually already allowed within our ordinance, but was moved to here. We allowed partially, but allow solar easements to be filed consistent with the Minnesota State Code. Any property owner can purchase an easement across the neighboring properties to protect access to sunlight. The easement can apply to buildings, trees, or other structures that would diminish solar access. So it's already in state code. We're just stating it here.
I don't like that,
Nope.
but nothing, that's already.
Nothing we
in-
can do about it, so otherwise I wouldn't have put it in here, but it's nice to have, so that we're aware always that it is there.
Well, good job. There's a lot of information there.
Yeah,
Yeah. I can tell you did research on it, so good job.
the only thing I didn't like as far as language-wise was like on principal uses. The city of Isani encourages the development of
Yeah.
commercial or utility-scale solar energy systems.
Doesn't mean encourages it in general, but it encourages in the places we want it to go.
I would just say
I-
accepts.
I don't want it.
The city of Isani puts up with.
Yeah. That was one thing that stuck out.
Okay, so I'll find better wording for that.
Okay. Any other thoughts, guys?
Tolerate.
We don't want solar farms.
Tolerates is good.
So I guess when I was rereading this quick, just to double check, so we require a conditional use permit if you don't follow the codes for residential. So that's if you're not following these standards. But in ground mounted, I have a site plan review is required for ground mounted. Do you want to keep that for residential? I'm assuming no, or do you want to look at, okay, do it at planning commission. Okay, we'll do it at planning commission. Okay, yep.
All right, let's see, what else, do we have anything else that's
Ballistic
pressing on
window
old
film?
business?
No.
Let me get back to my sheet here. Code enforcement, yeah, I think the rest of that probably could be pushed off to December.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
I have a motion to adjourn from Councilman Lundin and a second from Councilman Heeman. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. That motion carries 5-0. We are adjourned.
I was looking for